The back. I'm just taking some comments here. The person in the blue shirt with spectacles on, yes. You, sir.
That's right. Sir Winston Churchill...
All right, he's got a white shirt. Go on then, Farron.
Sir Winston Churchill put everything on the line so that my ancestors wouldn't get, slaughtered in the concentration camps. But here sits a man who says that that's a myth, just like a flat world was a myth. How could you say that? How could you?
Can I answer those 3 points very briefly? Firstly, for that one, I cannot explain why I used to say those things. I can't tell you... any more than I can tell you why I've changed my mind. I can't tell you the extent to which I've changed my mind, because European law...
This is rubbish.
Because European law prevents me from doing so.
There is no law here that stops you explaining yourself.
And we refused a European arrest warrant on precisely this from a country that does require Holocaust denial to be an offence, and we refused that.
And as a Justice Minister, I promise you, if you want to explain why you don't believe it... Go on.
Go ahead.
Go on.
You got it.
You have the freedom now to explain it.
But unfortunately, the French courts and the German courts would not recognise me that.
I'll sort that out for you as well.
The Justice Minister.
Hold on.
Come on.
I have a question. Have you actually changed your mind, or do you only say you've changed your mind because the law makes it illegal to be a Holocaust denier?
I have changed my mind. A lot of it's about figures, and one of the key things. Yes. And one of the key things which makes me change my mind is British radio intercepts of German transmissions about the brutal mass murder of innocent Jews on the Eastern Front during anti-partisan warfare, which changes the figures very greatly.
What about the Holocaust? Did that require some intercepts?
Can I get back to one of the other
points
now?
What about Auschwitz? Couldn't people see with their own eyes what happened in Auschwitz? You didn't need a subsequent radio intercept to find out that people were gassed at Auschwitz.
Absolutely. Right. We're going to move on. I'm going to move on. We've spent a lot of 20 minutes on that first question. There are many, many other questions and many issues to be raised, many of them centred inevitably on the BNP. And I want to take this one from Tariq Ali, please.
Why is Islam a wicked and vicious faith?
This is a quotation that you made twice, I think, about Islam. It was wicked and vicious. You confirmed it the other day. You start off. Why is it a wicked and vicious faith?
Because it treats women as second-class citizens, because it says that a woman victim of rape should be stoned to death for adultery, and because it orders its followers to be harsh with those of the unbelievers who live near to them, and it ordains as a religious duty the murder of Jews as well as other non-Muslims. That's in the Quran. There's no point shaking your head. There are good points about Islam. For instance, it opposes usury. It wouldn't have let the banks run riot in the way that the Labour Party and the Tory Party have done. There are good points, but it doesn't fit in with the fundamental values of British society: free speech, democracy and equal rights for women.
So what's your policy on Islam?
My policy on Islam is a truce with Islam. I'm not the one with the blood of 800,000 Iraqis on my hands after an illegal war, whereas Jack Straw is. I've never hurt one single Muslim. I believe that the West should stop trying to de-Islamify the Middle East and should leave those sovereign countries to run their own affairs. We shouldn't have gone into Iraq. We must never go into Iran, despite the fact that's where the Tories will take us in due course. We should leave them alone, and we should ensure that if Muslims are staying in this country, they do so on the understanding that our country must remain fundamentally a British and Christian country.
Sorry, can you just explain, if Muslims do stay in this country, what must they do?
They must acknowledge that Britain always has been and must remain, and it's right that it should remain, a fundamentally British and Christian country based on Western democratic values and not on the eternal values of the Quran.
Saeed Awasi?
From that very interesting answer, I can't work out whether he despises Muslims or he thinks they're his best friends. Mr. Griffin is obviously a confused man. Because on the one hand he says that he doesn't abide by and believe in lots of values that he attributes quite wrongly to Islam. And yet it was Mr. Griffin who was on the front cover of a magazine along with Colonel Gaddafi, Ayatollah Khomeini and Louis Farrakhan, and himself calling himself the New Alliance. It was also Mr. Griffin who shared a platform with Abu Hamza. Many of you may know him as Captain Hook. Most Muslims think he's some nutter from the East End of London, and therefore not even part of the faith of Islam. And yet Mr. Griffin considers him to be a sheikh, i.e. a learned scholar, and he believes that he and Abu Hamza have similar views. Mr. Griffin is a thoroughly deceptive man who comes on here and tries to sell whatever message that he wants. He is no friend of Islam. He is here to demonize Islam, just as he demonizes Christianity. Because, you know, there is nothing Muslim about the likes of Abu Hamza and others who actually preach extremism in the name of that faith. Mr. Griffin here preaches extremism in the name of Christianity and brings that faith into disrepute as well.
I'd like to say to Nick Griffin, travelling is all about education, educating your mind, understanding things. And I'd like to know how much travelling you've done around the world, because that is one sure way of learning the true side of another culture or a religion. How much travelling have you done, Nick?
I've been a lot of the time around Europe, to the United States. I went to Libya long before members of the Labour government recently, and I said to the representatives of Gaddafi that before he should do anything else, he should stop funding the IRA, which might be why I never got to meet him.
You wanted him to fund you instead?
Yes, you did.
The man with spectacles.
You wanted him to fund you instead?
The man with spectacles up there.
That's why he went there.
That's absolutely right.
Thank you very much. I won't attack you, Nick, but I'm proud to be a British Bangladeshi Muslim who has stood for Parliament before in order to try to serve the British public. And I understand the importance of dialogue between communities. However, I find that you're isolating people like myself, the Muslim community, by refusing to engage positively. Instead, you are misrepresenting Islam and scaring people about Islamification. Surely, if that is, if you fear Islamic laws or Sharia laws, then really you should be going after the indigenous Christian community, because you're advocating Christianity. In the last book of the Bible, Revelation, it does say in 2 places that when Christ comes back, his rule will be the rule like a rod of iron, and nations will be smashed like potted clay. So why isolate Muslims and not target Christianity?
Everybody, we can all lay our stories out and talk about, how we see Britain. We know what Britain is, but this doesn't really matter to Nick. Not really, Nick, not really. What matters to Nick is his own vision of this country, which is these little tiny potted bits of history. For instance, on his site, he starts his history largely in 700 AD. Where's the rest of British history? Where's the Romans? There's a reason the Romans aren't there, because they were a multicultural society. Anybody could be a Roman citizen. And there were armies here of Africans and Asians and Europeans. And when Rome left, those people were left behind. Now, what happened to them? You think they hooked up with your indigenous Ice Age Britons, Nick?
Well,
okay. I'm going to move on to another point, because I think we're getting a bit off beam here. Now I'll come to Jack in a moment. Just to say before we take this question, that you can follow us on Twitter, BBC Question Time. You can text us 83981 if you want to comment on this programme as it's going along. CFAX page 155 will tell you what others are saying. Push the red button if you're watching digitally. Email us if you would like to do that. Johnny Lyle, please.